A few years back, when I was in college, I was dead set on becoming a Marine Corps officer. The program demanded top-notch physical fitness, so I had to stay in peak shape. At the time, I was also working late nights at a restaurant, often clocking out at 2 a.m. To keep up my training, I leave work, which was just a couple of blocks from my apartment, and jog 2 miles to my gym, work out, then run back home. The catch? I lived in a rough part of town. Think rundown streets, sketchy vibes, and a reputation for trouble. This was in Louisiana, where the humidity clings to you like a second skin, and the night feels heavier than it should. Despite the danger, I had a chip on my shoulder, a belligerent streak that made me stubborn. I'd run through the worst parts of the neighborhood on purpose, almost daring trouble to find me. The police would sometimes roll up beside me, their patrol car creeping along the cracked pavement, and warn me, "You shouldn't be out here, especially not this late." My response was always some variation of, "I'd rather get shot than let anyone stop me from doing what I want." Defiant, maybe stupid, but that's where my head was at. One night, around 3:30 a.m., I was jogging home from the gym, sweat-soaked and wired from the workout. The streets were dead quiet, the kind of silence that makes every sound feel louder. A dog barking in the distance, the hum of a far-off car. Then I noticed a beat-up van, the kind with chipped paint and a rattling engine, creeping along beside me. It was moving too slowly, matching my pace, and my gut twisted. I veered off the sidewalk, closer to the old, overgrown graveyard that ran alongside the road. In Louisiana, graves are above ground because of the high water table. Think rows of concrete tombs, some crumbling, some so old you can see the coffins peeking through the cracks. It's eerie even in daylight, but at night, it's something else entirely. The van stopped abruptly, and my heart lurched as 3 men climbed out. They didn't say a word, just started running toward me. Panic hit me like a freight train. I bolted into the graveyard, weaving between the tombs, my sneakers slipping on the damp grass. The place was a mess, overgrown weeds, broken graves, no lights, just shadows swallowing everything. I sprinted to a large tomb near a tree line, crouched behind it, and peeked out, my breath ragged. The men were still there, fanning out, their cell phone flashlights cutting through the dark as they searched for me. My chest tightened, and I could barely think. I slipped deeper into the trees, moving as quietly as I could, heart pounding so loud I was sure they'd hear it. The trees led to the edge of a highway, a small stroke of luck in an otherwise terrifying night. I fumbled for my phone and called my roommate, my voice shaking as I told him to come pick me up. They did, and I made it out of there, but the story doesn't wrap up neatly. I never found out who those men were or what they wanted. All I know is I've never been more scared in my life, running through that graveyard, feeling like prey in the dark. When I was about 15 or 16, living with my grandma in a 50-plus community, a quiet neighborhood designed for older folks, with tidy lawns and lots of retirees, I got a new neighbor. She was an older woman, probably in her late 60s, and at first, she seemed sweet as could be. She had this adorable 3-legged chihuahua that got along great with my dog, a scrappy little mutt I'd had for years. The two would scamper around together in the yard, and it was hard not to like her for that alone. But things took a turn, and what started as a friendly neighborly vibe spiraled into something straight out of a nightmare. It began with small, odd accusations. She started claiming I was stealing from her house, nothing big, just weird stuff like dog treats and incense. I could kind of see why she might point the finger at me. I was the only teenager in a sea of seniors, and it's not like you'd expect an 80-year-old to be sneaking around breaking into houses. Still, the accusations were so bizarre they almost felt like a joke. But they kept coming, and they got weirder. The final straw was when she accused me of breaking into her place and moving her furniture just a little bit, like I was some kind of prankster with too much time on my hands. I hadn't even been in her house, not once, even back when I was on good terms with the previous tenants. Things escalated one day when I was out in the front yard, pulling weeds from my grandma's garden under the hot sun. I was minding my own business, dirt under my nails, when I looked up and saw her standing in her doorway across the street. She stormed out, her face twisted with rage, and started screaming at me, cursing, calling me a thief, and yelling that I needed to stop breaking into her house. I was stunned. I'd never set foot in her place, and here she was, losing it in front of the whole neighborhood. She threatened to call the cops, which I figured was just bluster, but then she took it further. She shouted that if the police wouldn't do anything, she'd take care of me herself. I'm a rational person, so I assumed she meant she'd sue me or something. Nothing too crazy. But the way she said it, with this wild look in her eyes, sent a chill down my spine. Across the street, a family friend who lived nearby heard the commotion. She later told my dad she'd called him because she was worried about me. Apparently, she'd stepped outside to see what was going on and caught sight of my neighbor pacing around our house, clutching a massive kitchen knife. The neighbor had thought I was home alone, and the image of her stalking around with that blade, muttering to herself, was enough to make my friend panic. She called the cops, and they took the woman away for a 72-hour psychiatric evaluation, a standard hold in the U.S. when someone's deemed a potential danger to themselves or others. They let her go after deciding she was fine, but when she came back, my parents made sure I was never home alone. I'd always have my dad or someone else around, just in case. For a brief moment, things seemed to calm down. About a month after her release, she approached me while I was with my dad, all smiles and apologies, acting like nothing had happened. I wanted to believe she'd turned a corner, but it didn't last. Soon, the accusations started up again. Same old claims about me sneaking into her house, stealing random junk. She'd stopped coming at me with a knife, thank God, but her behavior got creepier. If I was outside, she'd watch me from her windows, just staring, unblinking. A couple of times, she even growled at me, low guttural, like an animal. It was unsettling, like she was unraveling. She'd mutter insults under her breath whenever we crossed paths, calling me a liar or worse. Eventually, something else happened. I never got the full story, but she was taken away again for another 72-hour psych hold. This time, whatever she did was bad enough that the community banned her from coming back. I don't know if she moved away or what, but that was the last I saw of her. The whole thing left me shaken, wondering how someone could go from sweet dog mom to knife-wielding menace so fast. It's not the kind of thing you forget, living in a quiet retirement community where the biggest drama is usually who's hogging the best spot at the community pool. When I was 8, I was a total tomboy, always mistaken for a boy because of my short hair, baggy t-shirts, jeans, and baseball cap. My name's Sam, which didn't help clear things up unless someone spotted my ponytail or got a good look at my face. I grew up in a small town in northern England, where the landscape was a mix of green fields and gritty relics of old industry. Behind our house was a farm with a sprawling scrapyard, a chaotic jumble of rusted cars, farm equipment, and junk that had been there so long. Plants had started growing over it, vines curling around steering wheels and moss creeping up cracked windshields. Some of the car stacks towered 7 or 8 vehicles high, like metal mountains. To me, it was a playground, a place to clamber and explore with zero sense of self-preservation. I climbed to the top of those stacks, getting a killer view of the surrounding fields, or turned the less rusted cars into hideouts, imagining they were forts or secret bases. My older brother used the scrapyard too, stashing his smokes, lads' mags, and a bit of weed in one of the cars, a beat-up old sedan tucked in the middle of a stack. When I found his stash, I was fascinated, especially by his BB rifle and a tin of lead pellets. He'd gotten too big to climb the stacks without risking them collapsing, so the hideout became mine by default. The rifle was my prized possession. On the ground, its range was pathetic, but from the top of a car stack, I could take out the remaining windows of old tractors and plows across the yard, the sharp ping of shattering glass giving me a thrill. I'd sit up there, smoking one of his cigarettes like I was some kind of tough kid, feeling invincible. One afternoon, I was perched on top of a stack, taking aim at a rusted combine harvester, when the farmer who owned the scrapyard appeared out of nowhere. I'd lived there for 6 years and never once seen him in the yard, so his sudden presence caught me off guard. He was a wiry man with a weathered face, his boots crunching on the gravel as he stormed toward me. At first, he just yelled, cursing me out, telling me to get lost and get out of his yard. I wasn't exactly subtle, sitting up there with a cigarette and a BB gun, so I couldn't blame him for being pissed. I started to cooperate, climbing down the stack, my sneakers slipping on the rusted metal. But as I descended, his tone changed, Suddenly, he wasn't angry anymore. He said he was going to take me to his office to call the police. Something about the way he said it, his voice dropping to a softer, almost coaxing tone, made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I froze about 12 feet off the ground, clinging to the side of a car. My brother had spent years filling my head with wild stories about this farmer, claiming he was a cannibal who grew cocaine for a local cartel, which, looking back, was ridiculous for northern England but terrifying to a gullible kid like me. I couldn't square the idea of this guy calling the cops. It felt off like a trap. He shouted again, telling me to come down, but then his voice turned sickly sweet, calling me darling and saying I wouldn't be in trouble. He even offered me ice cream if I came to his office. That shift scared me more than his yelling. His face changed too. There was something hungry in his eyes that still haunts me. I started climbing back up, my heart racing, ignoring his protests. He kicked the lower cars, and for a moment, I thought the whole stack might come crashing down. Then he grabbed the roof of one car, shaking it, like he was testing if it could hold his weight to climb after me. Before I could find out what he'd do next, a loud crash of glass echoed across the yard, followed by car alarm blaring. Both of us whipped our heads toward the sound. There was my brother, standing by a smashed window of some junk BMW, flipping the farmer off with both hands. He chucked another rock at the car and bolted, the farmer tearing after him, cursing. I seized my chance, scrambling down the stack and sprinting home, my legs pumping as fast as they could carry me. I locked myself in my room and cried, convinced my brother was dead, caught by the cannibal farmer of my nightmares. But about an hour later, he showed up, looking shaken but alive, with that wiry speed of his that always got him out of trouble. He cooked us some chicken nuggets, cracking jokes until I calmed down, acting like it was no big deal. When my dad got home, he sensed something was up but didn't push it. Later that evening, the police showed up at our house. My brother looked like he'd seen a ghost, but they just took him and my dad into the living room to talk while one officer stayed with me. I mostly ignored her snitches get stitches, but she teased out a few details about what happened. After about 15 minutes, they left, and my dad was surprisingly chill with the cops, which was rare for him. Once the door closed, he hugged my brother, handed him a beer, and told him to go to his room. Then I got the lecture of a lifetime, how dangerous it was to trespass, how damaging property was unacceptable, and how I'd be working in his garage, he's a mechanic, every day until the summer holidays ended. I whined, feeling like a brat, asking why my brother got off easy when he'd done worse, but it didn't change anything. I was banned from the scrapyard, not that I was eager to go back anyway. Years later, when I was in my mid-20s, I brought it up with my dad during a heavier conversation about some other dark stuff from my childhood. He started shaking when I told him the full story, and I thought I'd blown the whole thing out of proportion in my kid brain, that maybe the farmer was just some grumpy guy dealing with a destructive little punk. But my dad's reaction floored me. He said the farmer was a suspected sex offender, known by word of mouth among locals, including my brother and even the police who'd come by that day. He'd never been convicted until years later, when his own daughter spoke out. My dad had made me work in his garage that summer to keep me away from the scrapyard while he looked for a new house to move us to. That revelation hit me hard, turning a scary childhood memory into something even darker, knowing how close I might have come to real danger that day. I'm almost 20 now, but I've been on my own for a while, moving from my hometown of Detroit to Chicago for university, and then to Santa Cruz, California, to start my marine biology course in the second semester. I'm an outgoing person, so settling into new places has never been a big deal for me. I make friends fast and dive right into the vibe of a new city. Santa Cruz, with its laid-back coastal charm, surf shops, and sunny boardwalk, felt like a fresh start when I moved there a little less than a month ago. But one experience from those early days stands out, starting innocently enough but turning into something that left me rattled, questioning how I'd missed the red flags. It began with a guy named Martin. I met him during a night stroll around my new neighborhood, just taking in the salty ocean air and the quiet streets lined with colorful bungalows. He approached me, polite and charming, dressed sharply in a button-up shirt and jeans, looking like he belonged in a beach town ad. He was only 3 years older than me, 22, and honestly pretty darn good looking with a warm smile and easy confidence. We hit it off right away, chatting about random things as we walked under the streetlights. What started as a casual one-night stand turned into something more. We kept seeing each other, hanging out at local cafes or walking along the beach. He said he was studying literature, which was a big deal to me because that was my major before I switched to marine biology. We had stuff in common, and I let myself get caught up in the moment, enjoying the spark without overthinking it. But there were things about Martin that started to nag at me. His friends, for one, gave off a weird vibe. They were loud, overly familiar, and didn't seem to fit the chill Santa Cruz scene. And Martin himself was cagey. He didn't like talking about his past or his life beyond surface-level stuff. I shrugged it off at first, chalking it up to him being private, but as I spent more time with him and his crew, things got uncomfortable. His friends would hit on me openly, even right in front of him, saying crude things like how they'd totally do me if Martin wasn't in the picture. He never reacted, just sat there with a blank expression, which made my skin crawl. Worse, I started noticing they didn't seem to know much about Santa Cruz, like basic stuff locals would know, like the best taco spot or which streets to avoid at night. It was odd for people who were supposedly from the area. I tried bringing it up with Martin, asking why his friends acted that way or why he dodged questions about himself, but he changed the subject or brushed me off with a laugh. My gut started screaming that something wasn't right, and I couldn't ignore it anymore. The turning point came one night when we were hanging out at my place, a small studio apartment near campus with big windows and a view of the ocean if you squinted. We'd done what we usually did, and Martin said he was tired, wanting to nap before we watched a movie. I didn't mind, so I headed to the kitchen to whip up something to eat, maybe a sandwich or some ramen. As I was rummaging through the fridge, I noticed his phone on the counter, buzzing and lighting up with notifications. Normally, I'm not the type to snoop. Privacy matters to me, but every red flag I'd been ignoring came rushing back. I glanced at the screen, and my heart nearly stopped. A Facebook notification popped up, which was weird because Martin had told me he didn't use Facebook. Worse, the name on the notification wasn't Martin. It was something else entirely, a name I didn't recognize. The message was from one of his friends, who I now suspected was also using a fake name. It read something like, "How long are you going to wait? Just bring her, we're going back home tomorrow." My stomach dropped. I stepped away from the phone, my hands shaking, just as Martin came back into the room, asking casually what I was cooking. I tried to play it cool, forcing a smile and mumbling something about making a snack, but my mind was racing. He must have noticed something was off because he grabbed his phone and immediately suggested we go out with his friends again. I shut that down fast, saying I wanted to spend time with just him alone. He wasn't stupid. He'd been lying about his identity for weeks, and he probably knew I'd seen something. He didn't push it, but I could feel him sizing me up, like he was trying to figure out how much I knew. My phones were upstairs, so I couldn't call anyone, and he knew it. I was stuck, trying to keep things normal while my brain screamed that I was in danger. Eventually, he left, acting like nothing was wrong, and I locked the door behind him, my hands trembling. I later found out through some digging that he and his friends were just vacationers in Santa Cruz, passing through for a few weeks. They hadn't done anything illegal, technically, just lied about their names and who they were. But that message, the way his friends acted, the way he avoided my questions, it all added up to something sinister. I'm just glad I never went to meet his friends that night. I don't know what would have happened, but I know I dodged something bad. The whole thing left me shaken, second-guessing my instincts, but thankful I'd trusted my gut when it mattered most. I've always been an atheist, skeptical of anything paranormal, but this one experience turned my view of reality upside down. It happened just a few hours ago, around midnight, and it's still so vivid it makes my skin crawl. I was on a bus in Vancouver, Canada, part of the city's public transit system, which includes buses, SkyTrans, elevated metro trains, and the sea bus, a ferry that crosses the Burrard Inlet. I was with my friend Veronica, heading to the waterfront station to catch the SkyTran and then the sea bus to get home. We were chatting, and one of us mentioned I was headed to waterfront. Veronica made a half-joking comment about not saying my destination out loud on the bus, in case someone decided to stalk me. We laughed it off, but a small knot of unease settled in my stomach, like a warning I couldn't quite shake. The bus was nearly empty, just the hum of the engine and the soft glow of overhead lights. I noticed 4 men sitting up front, chatting quietly, their voices a low murmur. Looking back now as I write this, I can't recall seeing anyone else on the bus, which feels strange, but at the time, I didn't think much of it. When we reached my stop, Veronica walked me to the Skitran station, a short distance away. I paid for my ticket, grumbling to her over the phone about how transit fares had gone up by 5 cents, a running joke between us about Vancouver's pricey system. We chatted a bit more as I headed down the stairs to the platform for the Skitran to Waterfront. The station was quiet, the kind of late-night hush where every sound echoes. A girl was sitting on a bench about 15 feet away from me, and I immediately thought I recognized her from the bus, though now I'm not sure if I actually saw her there or not. It didn't make sense. How had she gotten from the bus stop to the Skitran platform without me noticing her on the way? But I brushed it off, too tired to overthink it. She looked young, maybe 9 to 15, which was odd for someone to be alone past midnight. She was small and slim, with this striking gray bob haircut that looked almost too perfect, like a shiny, hard helmet rather than real hair. If it was a wig, it was a good one, but it gave her an uncanny vibe. I couldn't place her facial features or clothes exactly, even though I stared at her for a solid 15 minutes. My memory's hazy on that, which bugs me, but I do recall she had an alternative style. Maybe a leather or denim jacket, something edgy that stood out in the dim light of the platform. There was something off about her, a subtle wrongness that made me uneasy, like an itch I couldn't scratch. I kept my distance, standing 15 feet away, not wanting to get closer. When the Skitran pulled in, she didn't board the car directly in front of her. Instead, she walked the 15 feet to get into the same compartment as me. That sent a small jolt of weirdness through me, but I didn't look at her once we were on the train. I just sat there, staring out the window at the dark tunnels, trying to shake the feeling. At Waterfront Station, I got off to catch the C bus, which was leaving in just 20 seconds. I sprinted across the platform, my sneakers slapping against the concrete, and saw only one other person running to catch it, a guy in a hoodie, I think. I made it onto the C bus just as the doors were closing, collapsing into a seat, relieved. But when I looked up, there she was, sitting a few rows across from me, staring right at me. My heart stopped. It was the same girl from the Skitran, the one with the gray hair. I don't know how she got from the Skitran to the C bus in 20 seconds without me seeing her. She would have had to run faster than me, and I hadn't seen her on the platform. Her eyes were completely black, like pools of ink, and her face was blank, devoid of any human expression, almost robotic. I went from relief to near tears in an instant, my chest tightening with fear. Then her face stretched into the most horrifying, evil smile I've ever seen. Not a grin, not a smirk, but something unnatural, like it didn't belong on a human face. It wasn't just creepy. It was wrong, like looking at something that wasn't supposed to exist. The C-bus ride across the water takes 15 minutes, and I sat there frozen, watching her watch me. She didn't blink, didn't move, just stare with those black eyes and that awful smile. I kept asking myself how she'd gotten there, replaying the timeline in my head, but it didn't add up. Could I have hallucinated her? But no, she was there for the entire ride, solid and real, not some flicker in my mind. When the C-bus docked, I waited until the last possible second to get off, hoping she'd leave first. She didn't. I stepped off, my legs shaky, and glanced back. She was gone. I didn't see her on my walk home, though I was beyond terrified the whole way, jumping at every shadow, expecting her to appear around every corner. The more I try to remember her, the hazier it gets. All I can clearly recall is that helmet-like gray hair, her pale skin, those black eyes, and the way her blank stare morphed into that disturbing smile. Her clothes were alternative, like mine, and my hair is gray too, which makes it creepier, like she was mimicking me, but missing the spark that makes a person feel alive. It was like she lacked whatever makes humans human, or even animals seem sentient. I can't explain it fully, but it was so unnatural it shook me to my core. Why was she following me? Was it a hallucination, or something else? If it wasn't, what did she want? I'm still scared, still confused, and I don't know if I'll ever make sense of it. About a month and a half ago, when I went home for a 3-week visit, my dad decided we should go night fishing. I'm not a huge fan of fishing in general, let alone at night, and to be honest, my dad and I don't always get along. Our personalities are too similar, both stubborn as mules, and if you leave us together for more than an hour, it's like tossing a match into dry grass. There's bound to be shouting, arguing, or worse, what he jokingly calls fisticuffs. Still, he was set on taking me to this river near our new house in Oregon, a state known for its rugged forests and wild waterways. The house was freshly built, all clean lines and new paint, nestled in a rural area surrounded by dense woods. My mom and my 20-year-old autistic brother stayed behind, so it was just me and Dad trudging through the dark forest toward the river, about a mile and a half from home. The trek was rough. The path was littered with massive fallen trees and stumps, their gnarled roots hidden under a blanket of pine needles and moss. I kept tripping, my boots catching on unseen obstacles since I didn't know the lay of the land. Dad, on the other hand, moved like he was born in these woods, scoffing at my clumsiness and muttering something about how city living had made me soft. He didn't say it exactly like that, but it was close, his tone dripping with that gruff, almost cowboy-like judgment he loves to throw around. I fired back, blaming my stumbles on not knowing the area as well as he did, and that sparked the inevitable argument. The peaceful night turned loud and chaotic as we bickered the entire way to the river. He criticized my less-than-Christian lifestyle, his way of saying he didn't approve of my choices since I'd moved away, while I snapped back about his parenting, especially how he handled my brother. It was a mess, our voices echoing through the trees, scaring off any wildlife for miles. When we finally reached the river, a shallow, fast-moving stretch with white-capped water roaring over rocks, we settled into an awkward, tense silence. The air was cold, sharp with the bite of early spring, and I shivered as I sat on a fallen stump, pulling my jacket tighter. We set up our fishing gear, rods, tackle box, and small lanterns that cast flickering beams across the water. I knew this fight wasn't over, but for now we were both too stubborn to talk. Our lights danced on the river's surface, the only sound the rush of water and the occasional rustle of leaves. Then, out of nowhere, Dad stood up, his lantern beam swinging across the river to the opposite bank. There, standing in the faint glow, was a man staring right at us. He wore a bright orange t-shirt and tattered jeans, looking ordinary enough except the machete dangling from his belt, its blade glinting in the light. My stomach dropped. Dad snapped at me to start packing up our gear, his voice low and urgent. I scrambled to grab the rods and tackle, my hand shaking as I stuffed things into our bag. Dad started shouting across the river at the man, their voices mostly drowned out by the roar of the water. I caught glimpses of the man making sharp, agitated gestures with his hands, his body tense. Every time I looked up, their voices seemed to get louder, and my fear grew with it. Dad's never been one to carry a weapon in the woods. Hell, that's why I exist, as he'd probably joke. But this guy had a machete and looked unpredictable. The river was shallow, with plenty of rocks to cross, and even though it was cold snowmelt, I had no doubt he could be on our side in minutes if he wanted. I wondered if we'd accidentally wandered onto his property, a common issue in rural areas where land boundaries aren't always clear. "Drop the gear and let's go," Dad snarled at me, his voice cutting through my panic. I took one last look at the man, who was now stepping into the water, his hand resting on the machete's handle. My heart leapt into my throat. Dad grabbed my shoulder, firm but steady, and led me back into the woods toward home. He's an ultramarathoner, built for speed and endurance, and he moved like the forest was his backyard. Me? I was mostly out of shape from a year in a warmer climate, and I struggled to keep up, my lungs burning as I stumbled over roots. I couldn't hear if the man was following. My heartbeat was too loud, pounding in my ears, but I stayed glued to Dad, nearly crashing into him a few times. We finally hit the road near our house and sprinted the last stretch, bursting through the front door. Dad locked it behind us and stood watch at the windows, his face tight as he scanned the darkness for any sign of the guy with the machete. After what felt like forever, he decided we were safe and sat down with Mom to tell her what happened. We skipped the part about our argument, focusing instead on the man across the river. I went to bed feeling awful, my stomach churning with fear and guilt over our fight. No apologies were exchanged. We're both too hard-headed for that. The The next day, Dad grabbed the only gun he owned, a hunting rifle, and we walked back to the river after calling the police. They told us there was a local guy known for scaring people off forest land, probably just a crank trying to spook us, and not to worry too much. Feeling a bit foolish, we apologized to each other for our behavior the night before, our voices softer now. But when we got to where we thought we'd left our gear, we found our fishing rods bent out of shape, the lines tangled in the trees like some kind of twisted art project, and the tackle box gone. I still don't know what that man wanted, standing there in the middle of the night with a machete, but it sure as hell wasn't anything good. The memory of his silhouette across the river, hand on that blade, still makes my skin crawl. A couple of years ago, during my junior year of college, my roommate and I moved into a beautiful apartment in the state capital where our college was located, a bustling city with a mix of vibrant nightlife and some shadier corners. Our parents were adamant that two young women living alone needed a safe place, so they set strict criteria for our apartment. Well-lit sidewalks, keycard entry to the building, gated parking, and a location within a certain number of blocks from campus. After a long search, we found the perfect spot, a cozy, modern apartment with big windows and a view of the city's skyline. Our unit was at the end of a hallway, with a back door leading to a fire escape, secured by two heavy deadbolt locks. We loved it. It felt safe, fun, like we were finally living the real college experience, throwing little parties and staying up late studying or laughing over cheap wine. But then my roommate's boyfriend started creeping into the picture. At first, he just crashed for a night or two, but soon his stuff, sneakers, hoodies, a toothbrush, started piling up in our space. He was basically living there, using our water, electricity, and food without contributing a dime. I was working a part-time job on top of classes busting my butt, so I finally put my foot down. I told my roommate that if he was going to stay, he needed to chip in, split the rent 3 ways, or at least cover the full electric, water, and trash bills. I thought I was being fair. He didn't have a job, but that wasn't my problem. He even had the nerve to say he didn't want to work at McDonald's, like it was beneath him. I wasn't having it. If he wanted to mooch, he could flip burgers. Instead of stepping up, they came up with a sneaky workaround. My schedule was like clockwork, classes in the morning, work in the afternoon, home by evening, so they knew when I'd be around. They started sneaking him in late at night after I was asleep, and he'd leave before I got back from class. The problem was, he couldn't use my roommate's key since she needed it for herself when she was out. Their brilliant solution: leave the back door to the fire escape unlocked. He'd climb the fire escape, slip in, and either prop the door with a rock or jump the fence at the bottom when he left. It was reckless, but I didn't find out until it was too late. One Thursday morning, I had a rare day off from both work and school, and I decided to sleep in as long as humanly possible. I figured my roommate's boyfriend had already left for the day, since he usually cleared out early, so the back door was probably unlocked, as was their habit. I was out cold, dreaming like a princess in my cozy bed, when around 10 a.m., I heard the back door creak open. The sound pulled me just awake enough to register it, but I brushed it off, assuming it was my roommate or her boyfriend coming back for something. I started to drift back to sleep, the morning light filtering through my curtains, when I heard something else: slow, deliberate footsteps on the wooden floor. It wasn't the casual stride of someone who belonged there. It was cautious, like someone trying not to be heard, creeping through the apartment. My door was slightly ajar, just a sliver, and I strained to see through it without moving, but I couldn't make out anything. I was still half asleep, too groggy to get up and check, so I told myself it was just them being weird and tried to relax. But then, after what couldn't have been more than a few minutes, I woke up fully to the sound of my bedroom door easing open. I was lying on my side, facing the wall, my back to the door. My heart started racing, but I kept still, pretending to be asleep. Slowly, I turned over, acting like I was just shifting in my sleep. My eyes cracked open just enough to see. There, standing next to my bed, was a man I didn't know, a hulking figure, at least 6 feet tall and 250 pounds, with broad shoulders and a scruffy beard. He was unplugging my small flat-screen TV, just 5 feet from where I lay, and shoving it into a large blue shopping bag, like the kind you get at IKEA. He grabbed my DVD player next, then my change jar, a heavy glass jar full of quarters and dimes I'd been saving for laundry. I kept my eyes barely open, heart pounding so loud I was sure he'd hear it. When I shifted slightly, he froze, staring right at me. I held my breath, praying he didn't realize I was awake. After a moment, he went back to his work, grabbing the last of my stuff and casually walking out the front door like he was leaving a coffee shop. I waited until I heard the door click shut, then sprang out of bed, grabbed my phone, and dialed 911, my hand shaking so bad I could barely hit the buttons. I was hyperventilating, barely able to get my address out to the dispatcher, my voice cracking as I tried to explain what happened. The operator stayed calm, trying to soothe me, telling me the police were on their way, but I'd need to let them into the building since they didn't have a key. I was terrified to even open my apartment door, let alone walk down the hall. I crept toward the front door, my legs like jelly, and just as I reached for the handle, I heard, "Ma'am, it's the police." I nearly jumped out of my skin, paranoid because the dispatcher had just said they couldn't get in. What if it wasn't really them? I asked her to confirm, and she assured me the officers were at my door. I opened it and collapsed right there, my legs giving out completely. I hit the floor sobbing as a wave of relief and terror washed over me. The officers, about 10 of them, a mix of city police and campus security, helped me up and sat me on the couch. Outside, I could see through the living room window that the street was blocked with 5 or 6 cop cars, their lights flashing in the morning sun. They were doing a perimeter search, combing the area for the guy. The apartment was a whirlwind of activity. Officers were everywhere, inspecting the back door, dusting for prints, asking me a million questions about what was missing beyond my TV, DVD player, and change jar. I was shaking, crying, trying to piece together what else he might have taken, but my mind was a blur. Then my roommate and her boyfriend walked in, their faces blank with shock, like they'd just stepped into a crime scene, which they had. I was in the middle of giving my statement to a detective, describing the burglar, looking at mugshots, when I looked up at them and blurted out, "Someone robbed us while I was asleep." He came into my room. My roommate stared at me and said, "Oh crap, is any of my stuff gone?" I couldn't believe that was her first question. Not if I was okay, not what happened, just about her replaceable junk. 2 officers pulled her and her boyfriend aside to talk, while I finished with the detective. I called my boyfriend at the time, and he rushed over to help me pack a bag to stay at his place for a few days. Those few days turned into 4 months until my lease ended. The police never found the guy who robbed us. I didn't care about the stuff he took. My TV was old, the change jar wasn't worth much. What got at me was how he stole my sense of safety, my security in my own home. My roommate and her boyfriend never apologized for leaving the back door unlocked, just gave me a week, "I'm sorry this happened to you," without even asking if I was okay or if I wanted to talk. The day my lease ended was the best day of that year. I couldn't wait to get away from them and that apartment. It took months of counseling to feel safe again, and even now, I never sleep with my back to the door, and I always keep a knife under my mattress. That morning changed me, and the betrayal of my roommate's carelessness still stings just as much as the fear of waking up to a stranger in my room. About a year ago, I met a guy named Joey at a bar in my city, a lively spot with neon lights, loud music, and a crowd of 20-somethings looking for a good time. I wasn't looking for anything serious, just a fun night out, and Joey seemed to be on the same page. He was charming, with a quick smile and a knack for keeping the conversation flowing over our drinks. We hit it off instantly, laughing over shared stories and trading playful banter. What started as a casual hookup turned into a regular thing. We'd meet up a few times a week, grab drinks, or hang out at my apartment, a small but cozy place with mismatched furniture and a view of the downtown skyline. It was easy, light, exactly what I wanted at the time. As weeks turned into months, Joey started opening up more, getting more intimate in ways I hadn't expected. He told me about his ex-girlfriend, who had taken her own life less than a year earlier. The story was heartbreaking. His voice cracked as he described her struggles and how he felt helpless watching her spiral. I felt bad for him, my heart aching for the pain he carried. I tried to comfort him, telling him it wasn't his fault, that he couldn't have changed what happened. I thought sharing something so heavy meant he trusted me, and it pulled me closer to him. At some point, without really discussing it, we became exclusive, not a proper couple, but we agreed not to see other people. Or so I thought. Then I found out he was seeing another woman behind my back. A mutual friend let it slip, casually mentioning seeing Joey with someone else at a club. I was pissed. Honesty is a big deal to me, and I felt like he'd been playing me, stringing me along while living a double life. I confronted him, and he didn't even try to deny it, just shrugged like it was no big deal. That was it for me. I ended things right then and there, cutting him off cold. He didn't seem to care much, which stung even more. I was sad, angry at myself for falling for his charm, feeling like I should have seen through him sooner. But I didn't dwell on it long, ready to move on and put him in the rear view. That's when things got creepy. Joey started texting me like nothing had happened, asking to hang out as if we were still a thing. I shut him down, telling him I wasn't interested and didn't want to waste my time anymore. His response was unhinged. He accused me of seeing someone else, called me dishonest, and threw insults at me, calling me a liar, a slut worse. I was stunned. I told him he was acting crazy and to stay away from me, but he escalated, threatening to kill himself. That hit me hard. I have a history with suicide, someone close to me had struggled with it, and the idea of someone I knew dying, even if it was manipulation, gnawed at me. I couldn't sleep, haunted by the thought that I might regret doing nothing. So I texted one of his friends, asking him to check on him, hoping that would be enough to clear my conscience. A couple of days later, Joey called me, sounding calm, almost contrite. He apologized, saying he'd had a rough couple of weeks and really wanted to see me, just to talk. Against my better judgment, I agreed, thinking maybe I needed closure or at least to know he was okay. We met at a bar we used to frequent, a dimly lit place with worn leather booths and a jukebox playing old rock tunes. I wasn't planning to get back with him. I was still hurt, still angry. We sat across from each other, but it was awkward, like strangers pretending to know each other. We barely spoke, just ordered drinks and some fries, the silence heavy between us. He seemed to be ignoring me, staring at his phone or the wall, and I got fed up fast. I finished my beer, tossed my share of the bill on the table, and told him to have a good life. I walked out, more pissed than before, ready to be done with him for good. As I stepped onto the sidewalk, the cool night air hitting my face, I heard someone running behind me. I turned, expecting Joey, but when I saw his face, a cold shiver ran down my spine. His eyes were wild, like something had snapped inside him. He caught up to me and shoved me against the brick wall of the bar, his hand clamping around my throat. "You're not going to leave me like that," he hissed, his fingers tightening. I'd never been in a situation like this before, and fear paralyzed me, my body going rigid as I gasped for air. I couldn't move, couldn't think, my heart pounding in my chest. Then, out of nowhere, the waiter from the bar, burly guy with quick reflexes, came charging out. Apparently, Joey hadn't paid the rest of the bill, and the waiter had followed him. In seconds, he had Joey pinned to the ground, his arm twisted behind his back. I slid down the wall, coughing and crying, my hand shaking as I tried to catch my breath. The waiter called for help, and I thanked him before stumbling away, desperate to get home. I only told my best friend what happened, my fear turning to anger as I replayed it in my head. I wanted to confront Joey to make him pay, but I'm 5 feet 3 inches and don't exactly hit the gym. I knew I'd be the one getting hurt if I tried anything. So I let it go, vowing that if he ever contacted me again, I'd find a way to make him regret it. He never did, and I thought that was the end of it. But 2 months ago, I saw him again, not in person, but on TV. His face was plastered across the local news, accused of murdering 3 women, all of whom had been his girlfriends at the time. The police were calling him a serial killer. The report said he'd been inactive for a year between his second and third kills, the exact year we were together. My blood ran cold. I tried reporting what happened to me to the police, but they brushed it off, saying it was too long ago to matter. I'm not afraid anymore, but I'm sad, heartbroken for those women and for the thousands of others in my country who are killed every year, their cases often ignored or forgotten. Knowing I was so close to someone capable of that kind of evil, that I shared my life with him for months, still shakes me. It's a weight I carry, a reminder of how close I came to being another name on that list. Ever since I was a kid, My family's house has been a source of strange, unsettling experiences. It was an old place, creaky and full of shadows, with peeling paint and a backyard that always felt too quiet. As a young child, I'd see things that didn't make sense. Animals darting around corners that weren't there when I looked closer, like bats flapping in the air only to vanish. Sometimes I'd catch glimpses of eerie faces in the walls, their features twisting in the grain of the wood or the cracks in the plaster. But the worst was when I was alone. An overwhelming sense of being watched would settle over me, heavy and oppressive, paired with a dread that made my chest tight. It wasn't just a kid's imagination, it felt real, like something was always lurking just out of sight. As I got older, into my early teens, the experiences got worse, more vivid. I started seeing shadowy figures, human-shaped silhouettes standing in doorways, just staring at me. I'd hear noises too, sometimes a low murmur, like a crowd of people talking in another room, even when the house was empty. One night, I woke up to a chilling sight, a skeleton dangling from the corner of my room, its bones swaying slightly as if caught in a breeze. Laughter, cold and distant, filled the air, like a crowd mocking me. I'd blink, and it would be gone, but the fear lingered. Even during the day, I'd catch glimpses of those silhouettes, always at the edge of my vision, vanishing when I turned to look. Every time I opened a door, I braced myself, half expecting to come face to face with someone or something. The constant feeling of not being alone never left me. By my late high school years, I leaned hard into skepticism, despite my religious upbringing. I told myself it was all in my head, tricks of light, overactive imagination, maybe even stress. I chalked it up to seeing shadows or hearing things that weren't there. When I moved away for college, the experiences stopped completely. My dorm was a bland, modern box, but it was peaceful. No shadows, no voices, no dread. I slept better, the dark didn't bother me, and I stopped jumping at every creak. But every summer, when I returned home, it all came rushing back, worse each time. One night, I was in my room, strumming my guitar and singing softly, lost in the music. I stopped dead when I heard loud, husky breathing right outside my door, like someone or something was standing there listening. It was one of the worst nights of my life. I tried to leave, grabbing my keys to drive somewhere, anywhere, but as soon as I stepped outside, the trees seemed to watch me, their branches looming like silent sentinels. A strange urge pulled me back to the house, like I wasn't allowed to leave. When I got back to my room, I locked the door, dropped to my knees, and prayed harder than I ever had. I was raised religious, and though my faith had wavered, I clung to it that night. I boldly declared that whatever spirit was in the house had no power over me, my voice shaking but firm. As I spoke, I felt a shift in the air, like something menacing had been moving toward me and suddenly stopped, retreating into the shadows, still watching but held at bay. It was a fleeting moment of defiance, but it didn't end the experiences. After graduating college, I moved back home, my faith shaken from years of drifting away from church during school. I'd hit a rough patch, questioning everything I'd been raised to believe. Desperate for some peace, I started attending a local Anglican church, a small, welcoming place with stained glass windows and a kind rector named Father Thomas. I grew close to him, sharing bits of my experiences over coffee after services. He listened without judgment, his calm presence a lifeline. I hoped constant prayer would banish whatever was haunting the house, but the incidents kept coming. One night, I woke to a strange creature crawling across my ceiling, gaunt, with two long limbs, scuttling like a spider before vanishing into the walls. Another time, I checked a recording from my alarm clock app, set to monitor my snoring for a sleep study. Amid my heavy breathing, I heard a distinct whistling at 2 a.m., clear and deliberate. No one in my family whistles, and I was alone on the bottom floor. The sound sent chills down my spine. I took the recording to Father Thomas, my heart pounding as I played it for him. He didn't dismiss it. After consulting with the bishop of our diocese, a common step in the Anglican Church for serious spiritual matters, he proposed a house blessing, a ritual to cleanse the home of any malevolent presence. He came over one evening, carrying a small vial of holy oil and a prayer book. The blessing was methodical. He anointed every doorway with oil, marking crosses above the frames, and blessed each room with prayers, his voice steady and reverent. He ended with a specific prayer over me, asking for protection and to banish whatever spirit lingered in the house. As he finished, I felt an immediate change, like a weight lifting. The air seemed lighter, the house happier, though it's hard to explain exactly how. It was as if the oppressive presence had been pushed out, leaving only calm behind. Amazingly, I haven't had a single experience since. The house feels different now. No creaks, no shadows, no sense of being watched. It's quiet in a way it never was before. I asked my parents if they'd ever experienced anything like I had. My dad, a conservative sociologist in a field that leans heavily left, admitted the house had seen dark moments, hate directed at him and my mom from professional rivals, bitter feuds that left a mark on the place. But he never saw or heard anything himself. I haven't asked my older siblings yet. They've all moved away, and we don't talk as much as we used to. The house's history is murky. The previous owner was deeply disliked by neighbors, rumored to have been involved in some creepy stuff, though no one ever gave specifics. Whatever it was, I'm just glad it's gone. Sharing this story has been cathartic, and I've been surprised by how many people, even religious ones, have similar experiences. The house is peaceful now, but I'll never forget the years it felt like something else was living there with us. I'm 18, male, and a pretty big guy. Not just tall, but broad-shouldered, built from years of sports and lifting. That day, I was dressed in my usual gear, a massive black leather jacket that makes me look even bulkier, black skinny jeans, and heavy boots, giving off a bit of a punk vibe. I've got a huge Alsatian dog, a German Shepherd to Americans, named Max, who needs walking 3 times a day, about an hour each time. He's loyal but intimidating, with a deep bark and a protective streak. My house sits right next to a large state park, a sprawling mix of dense forest, winding trails, and a river cutting through it. There's a main path that's popular with joggers and families, but I always take Max down one of 2 secluded side paths that run parallel, about 20 meters apart. One path hugs the river, passing by an old, abandoned manor house that's half crumbling, overgrown with ivy. The other path is higher up, overlooking the lower trail and the water below. These details matter for what happened. It was around 1 p.m. when I left the house, Max trotting beside me, his leash loose in my hand. The sky was overcast, casting a gray pall over the park, but the air was crisp, perfect for a long walk. I took the main path until I reached the fork for the secluded trails, choosing the one by the river so Max could splash around in the shallow water. We'd gone about a mile, the sound of the river gurgling and Max's occasional happy bark the only noises, when I heard voices up ahead, around a bend in the path. I tightened Max's leash, keeping him close as we approached a steep section where the trail climbed a hill with a 10-meter drop to the rocky river below. I moved slowly, cautious about startling anyone. As I rounded the corner, the hill's slope eased, and I spotted the source of the voices. A woman in a bright pink blazer was sitting on the ground, talking to a man who was halfway down the hill, almost in the river. His bike was overturned next to him, like he'd taken a spill. Something fell off right away. The woman was smiling too widely, her expression unnervingly cheerful for the situation, while the man looked disheveled, his clothes damp and muddy. It seemed like an accident, but the scene didn't add up. The path wasn't slippery, though it was narrow and steep, with an 8-meter drop of jagged rocks into the churning water below. As I got closer, I overheard their conversation. The woman said, "Someone's coming," and the man grumbled something I couldn't catch. She replied, "My dog started crying and walked just off the path to investigate, so I pulled him back." Max hadn't reacted, which was odd. He usually growls at strangers, but I asked if everything was okay. She didn't answer, just kept smiling, her eyes locking onto mine before flicking to the man, who was older, balding, and glaring at me. I got a better look at her as I passed. She was in her late 40s, maybe older, with a garish pink blazer that clashed with her camouflage trousers and oversized hunting boots. Her vibe reminded me of someone trying too hard to stand out, like a character from a movie. Think Dolores Umbridge from Harry Potter, all fake sweetness with a creepy edge. I kept walking, Max tugging at the leash to get to the water, but the encounter left a bad taste in my mouth. After about 10 minutes, the path looped back toward the main trail or continued deeper into the woods. I decided to turn back, not wanting to push my luck on the same path. But as I hit the main trail and started toward home, a gut feeling stopped me cold. What if that man was actually hurt? Or maybe they were just spooked by me and Max. Big guy, big dog, leather jacket, not exactly approachable. I couldn't shake the urge to check again. I doubled back, but this time I took the higher path, the one overlooking the river trail. As I peered down through the trees, my blood ran cold. The man was moving his bike to an even steeper part of the path, then lying down, arranging himself like he'd just fallen. He wasn't injured at all. He was faking it, staging the whole thing. The woman was nowhere in sight. Then I saw her, up ahead, stopping two boys who looked no older than 12, their bikes wobbling as they paused. She was saying something about a man being stuck, needing help, gesturing toward the trail below. My heart pounded. She was luring those kids to the man, who was clearly capable of moving and up to no good. I fumbled for my phone to call 101, the non-emergency police number in my country, similar to 311 in the US, but I was out of minutes, my plan drained. Panic set in, but I knew I had to act. I looped back to the river path, a 10-minute hike, my boots crunching on the gravel as Max sensed my tension and stayed close. As I approached the spot, I heard the woman and man arguing. She snapped, "Now where are we meant to go? If you weren't such a creep, those boys would have come." He shot back, "You said we couldn't tackle the big guy." My stomach twisted. They were talking about me. I made my presence known, walking fast, Max's leash tight in my hand. The path was narrow, less than a meter wide, and I had to pass within arm's reach of them. The man gave me a filthy look, his eyes narrowing, while the woman flashed the creepiest smile I've ever seen, her teeth yellow and her expression forced. I wasn't ashamed to admit it. I was scared. I broke into a run, Max keeping pace, and didn't stop until I was out of the woods, my chest heaving. At the park's parking lot, I spotted a park ranger, a local government worker in a green uniform, and spilled everything I'd seen, my words tumbling out in a rush. He listened, his face grim, and told me two boys had already reported suspicious activity. They'd said the woman claimed her husband had fallen off the path and needed help, but they didn't buy it and biked straight to the ranger. He'd called the police as soon as they told him. I left after that, shaken, and swore I wouldn't go back to that part of the park for a long time. The idea that those two were working together, preying on kids in broad daylight, still makes my skin crawl. I'm just glad those boys were smart enough to run, and that Max and I made it out without finding out what they were really after.